Well, thank you for joining us today. As Daniel pulls up the PowerPoint, I wanted just to let you know I will be covering the DMM on the agenda here. So I'll just be covering what the DMM is, a general overview and goals and objectives. We'll go through a quick background so you can see the evolution of DMM program. We'll cover very quickly some dashboards and team highlights. And then I'll pass it on to Daniel, and he'll be covering the technology updates, really the barcoding enhancements. So what is DMM? DMM is really just a cross-functional program initiative that is focused on improving processes, material availability, and communication when it comes to Encore's distribution material management. So our mission is to create a modern, unified materials management process to handle both internal and external customer needs. But the vision, the bottom line is that we want to have the materials at the right place, right time, quality, and value when they're needed. I lost the screen.
Is the screen not sharing anymore? Let me pull it back up.
There it is. Thanks, Daniel. So the DMM program leadership looks right now. We have currently 5 different sponsors. What I really would like to point out here is if you look at the areas of responsibility of those sponsors, it has a good cross-functional collaboration amongst all the value chain of the material management process. Our program management team is there to support the functional work streams. As you can see, the supply chain work stream is led by Robert Peel. Standards is led by Anthony Gordon. Design team is led by Jared Joseph. The strategic sourcing is led by Kelly Heinzerling. And the district storerooms is represented by Joey Horton. A good note to make here is that each of these teams are within themselves a cross-functional team as well. So the collaboration when we are addressing pain points and initiatives through the value chain is important to make that we're collaborating amongst all key stakeholders here. Our technology enablement is led by Sam Lefar. He is helping us coordinate not only within the work streams, but as well as supporting us in ensuring that we're leveraging all the other technology aspects and initiatives at Encore. Then we've also have a change management and sustainability support team. They really help us finalize any documents, trainings, and ensure that everything is as it should be as far as Encoreized. So our goals and objectives for the program are very simple. We focus quite a bit on the process improvements, such as standardizing processes and identifying areas for opportunity where we could really leverage technology and automation. We have a change management strategy where we're trying to help improve the cross-functional discussions and communication amongst all the key stakeholders. And then really taking a look at metrics and accountability, identifying roles and responsibilities for each of the processes we're touching. So briefly, I'd like to just go over the background and the timeline, just to give you a picture of the evolution of how DMM started and what it's become. I think back in February 2019, there was a recognition that there was opportunity to improve the material management process. It seemed to be very cumbersome. There was a lot of moving parts with all the moving key stakeholders. So that resulted in a large brainstorming session at a service center where there was over 151 pain points identified where there was areas of opportunity. That really was the beginning of what the first iteration of DMM was, which is distribution materials improvement was formed. They started grouping these pain points into initiatives and started formalizing teams. So in September of 2019 is when I was onboarded as a program manager. We started a rebranding or restructuring, if I may, of DMI into DMM. We had a recognition that we needed to partner up with OCM to help us formalize the process in regards to the strategy of communication. We recognized that we needed to create a pod sites for external customers, right, for our employees to have a repository for information, formalizing the DMM at encore.com email. And that was the beginning of the process of really the creation of DMM. In December of 2019, we even went to TMAC, a business consultant, and they helped us formalize and have a good direction in regards to our vision and mission of the program. So as that work continued, we had a better feel of a formal program, and we started onboarding more sponsors as well. In February 2020, we recognized that in order for us to really move the ball as far as process improvement and taking Encore materials management to the next level, that we needed to onboard a technology partner. And that's when Sam was able to join. Sam and his team were able to join us and really start helping us identify where are the technology utilization improvements. And in March, we finalized the DMM dashboard and database, just a central location where everything was going to be stored. And you'll get a view of that here in a little bit. So by the end of 2020, we have completed 28 of the 68 initiatives that we currently have. So here you see a view of the DMM dashboard. As I mentioned, we've completed 28 of the 68. And what I really like to focus here is just the statuses. This dashboard really gives us just an overview of where we're at, right? Complete means that the team leads and their team members have worked on an initiative, identified root causes, really identified the good work scope, and resolved or had a solution in place. An OCM status, what that means is that we are collaborating with our OCM team to help finalize any trainings, documents, or any associated strategies as far as rollout. That's a collaboration that happens between the team leads and OCM. So the blue will indicate an active status, which means it's still pending. That is still in the team lead and team members' hands where they're still actively working through the processes. And the purple will indicate on hold, or red indicate on not started. Any of those two statuses can indicate there's a potential long-term IT solution that we probably will going to wait on, or even there's a potential future solution that is going to be impacted by a different initiative at Encore. And then on the bottom there with the team leads, you could see a breakdown of the 5 different teams and their associated statuses. So the 68 initiatives were really broken down into 2 different types of initiative types. A lot of our initiatives are focused around operations efficiency, helping standardize processes and making sure that we're as consistent as possible in different areas of the process. System improvement is really helping us utilize our current technologies. How can we leverage that to implement sustainability? How can we leverage that to reduce the manual processes that we have? And then obviously training. We have to ensure that we're clearly communicating not only the changes, but that people fully understand how to utilize the systems to the best of their abilities, and to really leverage the improvement here. So I'd like to take a moment just to quickly give some team highlights. Right here we have the strategic sourcing. They have a total of 10 initiatives before they've completed. An example of one of the initiatives completed it's called Kmart, which is a prioritization module. It actually allowed a better way for them to prioritize material sourcing efforts. The benefits obviously was the quantitative sourcing guidance and a reduction in stockouts. And really the bottom line there is that they were trying to focus, making sure that they were focusing on the right TSNs at the right time. So instead of having just a plethora of stockouts, they were really focused on the right stuff at the time. So the supply chain team currently has 16 initiatives of the 68. And this example is actually a really good example of how to cleanly, if you click on those pictures for me, Daniel, pictures kind of say it a little bit easier. This is a before picture of kind of the space limitations they had at Trinity. You could see the forklift obviously is not going to fit through these pallets. The issue with this was that when you needed a kit, you had to touch multiple kits to get to the right one. Everything was horizontal. And the after picture, you could see they installed vertical racking where each kit has a designated area. There's plenty of space for a forklift to run to and from through these rackings. And more importantly, it increased the pallet size from 368 pallet sizes to over 1,000. So this is just one of the examples that the supply chain team implemented. So next we have standards. The standards, out of the 68, they actually have 8 initiatives. And the one that they have completed was a very difficult one. It was a very cross-functional initiative. We worked with operations, supply chain standards as well to ensure that we identified the consolidation of these wood poles. And this one's actually still in process, even though we've counted as complete. Every other week, we're sending out reports and keeping a close monitoring on how we're doing on this. So our design team has 14 total initiatives. As you can see, they've completed 10. The WR05, the standardization of the WR closing material management process, was a very large undertaking. This one really helped us improve accountability among the key stakeholders of the entire process, everything from designers to storeroom personnel and construction partners. This is an ongoing process in regards to how we reconcile our material, how to properly approve and look at as-built, and really has a big impact on our SOX implementation, our SOX program, our SOX a big impact on SOX, And then our stores team, they actually have 20 of these 68 initiatives. And our stores are a very high impacted work group of material management process. In some cases, some processes, they are the customer, but in other processes, they're the actual owner. So an example that we have right here is the standardization of the return of the material process. This was a very manual process that is still being worked on, but it's to improve communication and accountability amongst the key stakeholders. This is a sub-process of the WR material management. But this is a good example of where technology is going to be leveraged to help us move the ball, not only in standardization of process, but really utilizing technology to help us to get to the next level. And Daniel's going to go into that in more detail.
Hey, thanks, Amy. Can you all hear me all right still?
Yes.
Okay, and apologies, I think I might have had some video issues at the beginning. Let me see if I'll try to turn on my video before I dive into things. Okay, hopefully the video works for the rest of my part. Sometimes it has been cutting out, so apologies if in mid-presentation my face suddenly vanishes from you all. But hopefully at least my voice stays consistent throughout all of this. But yes, as Amy was saying, there's a lot of great work that the DMM program has been doing. And in large part, a lot of these impacts we're seeing from those initiatives are related to process standardization efforts in different parts of the supply chain, process improvement efforts in different parts of the supply chain. And really, the district storeroom example she just shared there is a good transition to talk about a lot of the technology enhancement efforts that our part of the DMM program has been working on a lot. And in terms of how we relate to a lot of the work Amy just presented, we're really building on that very solid, strong foundation that these DMM initiatives are providing in terms of process improvements, process standardizations, and figuring out ways to implement more technology-based solutions to, again, take the overall effectiveness of these initiatives to the next level and provide even more value on top of the existing work that's being done. Now, there are a lot of different initiatives that involve technology that our team is handling. So for the sake of this presentation, I wanted to focus on one specific type of technology-based solution, and that's really around barcoding-based technology enhancements. And thankfully, barcoding technology, we all likely have some level of familiarity with barcodes. They show up a lot in our day-to-day lives. You can think of the example of something as common as picking up groceries and checking out groceries at a grocery store, where those items you're checking out will likely have some sort of barcode label attached to it, which some system then scans and then processes whatever relevant information is associated with that item, and it helps you quickly perform the activities you need to perform. So in essence, that sort of barcoding technology is what we are hoping to utilize, but within the context of how do we incorporate barcode technology in supply chain specific processes. So later down this line, I'm very excited to talk about a specific barcode-based technology solution we're working on, but I thought before we really dive into a specific example, I wanted to start by first kind of setting the stage a little bit for all of us and starting very more general and overview of really what currently exists in different parts of Encore's supply chain in terms of current state material and equipment barcode scanning capabilities. So we see two kind of main sections here or categories, and it's just at a high level, what are some of the gaps or opportunities or pain points we've identified through various conversations with different groups across the supply chain. And as well as, on the right, we see risks, which are really just, if solutions aren't implemented to effectively address some of these opportunities or gaps, what are some of the potential impacts we could be looking at? To really even summarize the content of these bullets even a little bit more from a pain point standpoint, a lot of the big opportunities we've identified is really how do we address some of the manual material management activities that are currently happening. So, examples such as at the district storeroom, for instance, currently having to manually enter in asset information on, your desktop computer and having to manually click into each of those fields and, even utilize some paper-based documentation. So, physically looking at that paper documentation and then translating that information manually into some other system. So we see a lot of opportunities for improvement in terms of automating those activities, as well as from an overall material and asset visibility standpoint. So understanding or getting a better sense of how materials can be tracked across the supply chain. So again, to give a little bit more of an example there, materials, it is difficult to track materials at the district storeroom level currently, just because some of their processes currently rely on more paper-based tracking instead of digital-based asset tracking. So from a risk standpoint, and really one of the interesting takeaways that we got through these conversations we've had across different groups and work streams is that a lot of groups are already thinking of and even going ahead and trying to implement and design their own sets of solutions to address some of their more specific pain points or gaps, and that's great. I mean, we've through these conversations identified multiple different in-flight or planned solutions, but what we're hoping to accomplish in terms of an opportunities point of view is really taking all of that great work that these different groups have been doing and designing and trying to wrap it all up in a more consolidated, overarching program management point of view. And the hope is that through that sort of more intentional, higher level management and coordination with these different groups, overall designing a more effective set of solutions down the line. Oh, no. Is the slide frozen on your end? There we go. Okay.
Yes, we still see it.
Okay, great. So that's just kind of a high-level overview of some of the opportunities we've identified in the supply chain. And again, starting just a little bit high-level still before diving into specifics, I wanted to kind of call out specific benefits we're hoping to realize through the implementation of barcoding technology. And we see kind of three buckets here: process, technology, and strategic. Really, process and technology benefits are very intertwined in the sense that just the nature of barcoding technology itself allows for improvements across materials management activities. So again, taking the example of instead of manually entering in data for asset information, if you were instead able to scan a barcode that's attached to that asset, have that data automatically populate the corresponding fields in some other application or tracking software, then not only do you have a reduction in the amount of time it takes to perform certain materials management activities, but you also have greater data accuracy because you're just scanning data that's already encoded on a barcode instead of having to manually enter that information. So we see the potential for huge improvements there, and also from an overall digital chain of custody standpoint. So how do we get greater materials visibility in our supply chain through barcoding? And what we're hoping to do, and I'll speak more in depth about this, is designing solutions that would be able to capture a lot of that material activity data and asset tracking data. So whenever we put barcodes on assets and scan those and perform activities on those assets, making sure we're tracking all of those relevant activities, who all is performing what activity, at what point in the supply chain are they performing these activities, and really getting a better sense of all of that data. And that all feeds into really just these longer term and more overarching strategic benefits, that we're hoping to realize through barcoding based technology solutions. So, going along with that example, once we have greater visibility into all of those analytics and usage data, figuring out with these solutions how we can then incorporate this data into better measuring and tracking success. So once we've identified key success metrics, using these technology solutions to track those metrics, and even thinking later down the line, how do we effectively scale these solutions? The good piece of information there is just that the nature of barcoding means that it's an easily scalable technology in the sense that as we expand these solutions, we would essentially just be putting more barcodes on more and more assets and material types to better overall track the materials flowing through our supply chain. So this is the last more general high-level slide, and then I promise I will go into more specifics. But just before diving into the specifics, the last sort of more general piece I wanted to touch on with you all is just, how is our team going about the process of designing and implementing these barcode-based solutions? And it's really, three main phases. First one I've already kind of talked about some in discussing the current state analysis, because that's really the first step that our team took in terms of getting a solid sense of what all is currently happening at Encore in terms of solutions that different teams already have planned, having those necessary and important conversations with all departments and work streams across the supply chain, and taking a solid inventory and documenting the scope, the timing, the end user groups that are impacted by some of these things that different groups already have planned. But then building upon all that information in the next phase, and from that program management point of view, packaging all of that information we've gathered into a more cohesive, holistic, barcode, or even just technology-based roadmap for all the different Encore groups across the supply chain to look at. So, visually putting on a calendar through 2021 into 2022, what are the priority projects or initiatives that we should be focusing on, just to make sure from an overall resource allocation and timing and minimizing redundant work point of view, making sure that all of the groups across the supply chain are coordinated and involved in all of the planning and related activities necessary to effectively execute on agreed upon priority work. So we've already begun execution of a lot of the identified pieces of priority work. And in a little bit, I'll even talk about a specific example of one of these priority work pieces with you all. But just the last point here is even longer term. Again, thinking about those more strategic benefits and considerations, making sure we're measuring and tracking success of all these initiatives. So whatever solutions we're designing, making sure that there are mechanisms in place to capture whatever key success metrics we've identified, monitoring that over time. And from just a broader change management and sustainment point of view, we're actively working now to develop that sort of comprehensive change and sustainment strategy to make sure with these solutions that we're implementing, how do we get the feedback that we need from the relevant end user groups, and how do we take that feedback and translate it into continuously improving the solutions we implement. Okay. So that is a lot of general discussion, and I am excited to talk more specifically about one of the barcode-based technology solutions we are currently developing and hoping to implement at distribution storerooms, at distribution and transmission storerooms, really. And before talking about our specific solution, which we have called ScanHub, before talking about that a little bit more in depth, I wanted to provide the context-specific set of opportunities and gaps, as well as just what relevant technology currently exists with regards to district storerooms, and how does ScanHub fit into all of this. So currently, some of us have already heard of this warehouse management software that we currently use called Velocity. But if you haven't, Velocity you can just think about it as Encore's warehouse management system. So, it's the software, it's a web-based application that helps manage and track a lot of these materials flowing in the supply chain. But currently, this Velocity software is just implemented in those large central distribution warehouses, so the Trinity and Linked Central warehouses in particular. And what we recognized is that, just because at this point in time, those more geographically spread out district storerooms don't currently have access to this Velocity warehouse management software, it's left this opportunity to, better improve materials visibility, as well as, identifying some of those similar pain points I talked about in that more general pain point slide, just around at the storerooms, large improvements for automating some of these manual materials management activities that exist. So storerooms having to utilize, in some cases, paper-based documentation, or having to go into their desktop computers and manually type in information, as well as in certain materials management activities, storerooms having to manually receive materials from central warehouses and break apart materials and sort and count all of that information. So there's a lot of opportunities, especially at the district storeroom level, where this barcode-based Scan Hub solution can benefit them. So now I can talk to you more about the what is Scan Hub and what is this solution and how are we trying to implement it. And Scan Hub in essence is a mobile barcoding application. And what I mean by that is it's an application that will rest on a mobile device. In fact, we're alongside this software implementation effort. The plan for our team is also to equip district storerooms with upgraded scanner hardware. And what's interesting is that instead of thinking about scanners in terms of maybe more of the scanner gun sort of design, these new scanner hardware pieces take the form of a more traditional looking smartphone. So if you have like an Android phone or an iPhone that you normally use personally, you can think about these new scanner hardware pieces having the look and feel of those smartphones, but also retaining the scanning functionality that you might associate, with a more scanner gun design sort of hardware piece. So what we're envisioning is ScanHub would rest on those new upgraded hardware devices that would look and feel like a smartphone, but would allow users to do all of these new barcode scanning capabilities. So a related aspect of our ScanHub development is also having this ScanHub mobile application interface and connect with this this existing Velocity warehouse management software. So not only are we looking at extending that Velocity warehouse management system to district storerooms, but we're building on top of that and creating and developing this new mobile application for storeroom users to have on them when they're actually scanning and interacting with materials. And then behind the scenes, this application would be doing all of the interfacing with this Velocity system to, from a data standpoint, better track all of these materials that are flowing through district storerooms. And I wish I had enough time to demo to you all, a more end-to-end workflow in terms of just what an enhanced ScanHub workflow functionality looks like. But I thought that might be a little bit too ambitious. So instead, I'm going to try my best to kind of give you more concrete examples through the form of screenshots in terms of comparing and contrasting the solution that is available kind of pre-ScanHub versus the actual ScanHub solution, which you see on the screenshots on the right. And I'll kind of talk you through, just the examples of some of the enhancements the ScanHub application itself provides. So on the left here, we see actually a virtual terminal functionality on the Velocity web application. And you can see that there's, the buttons and functionality there to perform some of your standard materials management activities. So things like receiving materials or, physically putting away materials in certain bins or taking inventory on materials. But we see there's a lot of room for improvement in the sense that the functionality is definitely there, but it's very bare bones in terms of the graphics and the user interface. And we're hoping to enhance the user interface through this ScanHub application that we're developing. So to contrast it on the right here, we see instead of these kind of thin buttons, more of the modern looking tiles. And again, this would be on a touchscreen smartphone look and feel sort of hardware device. So if a user selects the ScanHub application off of their device, they would be eventually enter this sort of overview screen that we see on the right here, where we see tile icons, we see visual pictures that are associated with each activity to give a sense of what sort of work is involved in that workflow. We see more personalization in terms of the application already sensing the time with which a user's logged into the application, so it gives a little bit a little personalized good afternoon or good morning greeting to the user. We see on the top left, well, I don't have the user default functionality or customization pulled up, but there's those 3 bars at the top left, which would open up to kind of show greater individual user customization and configuration options. So overall, we see a much more modernized look and feel in the ScanHub application. But equally, or arguably even more important than just these cosmetic enhancements is also just the actual functional enhancements. So, how is ScanUp actually incorporating barcoding? And again, while I wish actually demoing a workflow would be ideal for showing that, I decided to pick this screenshot here. I was kind of doing a compare and contrast in terms of how we are actually implementing barcode functionality here. So we see on the left with the existing kind of virtual terminal functionality that we have all the information we need, like it gets the job done. We see material asset information at the top. In this specific screenshot example here, we see, someone's performing an inventory count, so they're trying to take inventory of certain items. So we see the material information, and we see all those fields on the bottom left there. For them, those are all require manual entry. So a user would currently have to, click into the field, find whatever information corresponds to that field, and manually type in that information. And in contrast, we see a couple of different enhancements in the right with this Future State ScanHub mobile application. So at the top, we see a much more streamlined, clearer display of relevant asset information. For instance, you can see the count ticket number, the item number, location, etc. And specifically from a barcoding enhancement point of view, we have clearly labeled fields that indicate that the information on that field can be populated via barcode scanning. So you see that little scanning icon next to the scan location field and the item number field. So in Future State, you can imagine, in this example, again, a user's taking inventory of material. So they would have the ScanHub application opened on their smartphone style scanner hardware device. They would, click that inventory tile. And when they're taking inventory and they come to this point in the workflow, they would instead be able to point their barcode scanner at an actual barcode on the relevant asset, and that information would automatically populate those relevant fields. So, all you need to do is point and scan to populate, in this case, the location and item fields, instead of having to manually enter that information. And, just minor enhancements we see as well. So even not necessarily barcoding specific, but just as another example, on the ScanHub screen on the right, we see a skip button here. And in the context of inventory, we thought that would be a process improvement in the sense that, if a storeroom person is physically closer to certain materials than others, then we wouldn't want them to arbitrarily have to just walk in an inefficient pathway to get to the materials they need to get to take inventory of, when instead, the storeroom user knows where their materials are. So give them the option to count in whatever order makes sense to them, so they can take inventory in the most efficient path possible. So just overall, we were trying throughout this application to make process improvements where we think it makes sense, and based on the input we get from end user groups, we see direct scannable fields, which can be populated through barcode scanning. And then overall, just from a user interface standpoint, we see efforts to kind of streamline and modernize the look and feel of this application. And again, I wish I could show you a full demo, but just to kind of bring it back to the overall, what benefits are we hoping to realize with this Future State ScanHub application? First, I guess I'll give a better sense of when can we expect this Future State application to initially be implemented at some of these storerooms. And our plan here is we're hoping by the end of Q1 of this year, so coming up pretty soon, and releasing our initial ScanHub application. And when I say phase 1 storerooms, it's really 3 distribution storerooms, and those distribution storerooms are Dallas, Benbrook, and Waco. And the reason we're just starting with those 3 storerooms is wanting to make sure that our technology and our application is really solid, that it's actually adding the value that we wanted to add for storerooms, getting the necessary feedback from these initial storerooms before we roll it out to to all the other storerooms. And overall, just from a benefit standpoint, again, I'm probably repeating this a little bit, but if anything is to be remembered from this technology presentation, the main sorts of benefits we're hoping to address is really just giving greater materials visibility, establishing that digital chain of custody, and overall just improving and automating materials management processes, whether that's through scanning to populate data fields instead of manually entering, or using master barcodes to scan whole pallets of materials and pull up that information instead of manually breaking apart and processing each material. So with that, I believe that is the end of our presentation. So I'll open it up for any questions.
Great, thank you. We've got some comments. Okay, we love the barcoding system. Do you think that in the near future we could create an app that could be used on cell phones for locations to use for trailers when we borrow them and take them in and out, check them in and out?
Yeah, so I think that's a perfect example of enhancements we've already heard from different folks, and we definitely noted those specific use cases in our backlog. We're trying not to be overly ambitious at first, so some of the initial scope is kind of what I've talked about, just with those velocity materials, but we can definitely envision scaling this sort of mobile barcoding-based solutions to multiple different assets. So trailers would be one of the other great examples there.
Right. Well, all the other questions I was thinking of, you answered towards the end. And so we got a couple minutes left if we have anyone else with a question, but I just am really excited about this. Those enhancements, they feel better to look at, just like you can just feel, okay, that's 1980s. And here we are in the 21st century. So great job. Thank y'all so much, Amy and Daniel, and thank all of you for joining us today. If you'd like to view a recording of this session or any other Innovation Week events, we will be posting recordings on Innovation Week very soon. And what else do I want you to know? We want to congratulate yesterday's prize winners. Don't forget that each session that you attend, your name is entered into the hat to win a prize. We will be drawing this afternoon for 20 more names, and we will mail those prizes directly to you if you win. So please go out to the Innovation Week website, check out everything we have. We have the prizes listed. We have a sponsors page with Jim Greer's message about today's event. And we just really appreciate your participation and hope you have a great afternoon.